Hard to find a translation literally for that word. But yes, my name is Rodney, originally from a small country called Suriname in South America. Nobody's ever heard of it, so I think that's about as interesting as it can get. My first language is Dutch. I then learned English, and from living in Miami, I was able to pick up a bit of Spanish. So I do offer my bilingual Spanish services here at JEA. I consider myself a people person, and in the CSC, sometimes you don't get to meet people at their finest moments. But when you can assist them in clarifying whatever's going on with their account, the smile that it puts on their face is kind of what makes my day. So I guess a love of people is what draws me and keeps me here.
We're heading to Waycross and possibly up to Valdosta for a mutual aid event that was caused by this last recent storm we had. We're sending 5 crews. There'll be 2 from Westside Service Center behind me, 2 from Southside Service Center, and then we've got 1 crew of troubleshooters coming from our Systems Operation Control Center. We've been told it's tornado and flatline wind, so we're expecting a lot of downed trees and broken poles. Always important that we help. That way, whenever it's time for us to be in need, that JEA's name's out there and they're willing to reciprocate.
Power is definitely essential. It's becoming even more evident with everyone working from home. At JEA, the underground department, we are responsible for all of the 3-phase commercial underground development jobs, and then we also maintain the downtown network. The crew that I'm in charge of is the network maintenance crew. So the majority of our time is we're going from building to building, and we do this annual testing. So throughout downtown, between the submersibles and the dry types, there are about 240 transformers and protectors that we do maintenance on. So that's basically 1 or 2 a day. And then as we come across some, we actually have a program now that we're upgrading the older ones to a newer style, a new technology that's the latest and greatest. And so far in the last year and a half, we've changed out 14 of those. JEA is a great place to work. It's very much team-oriented. The guys get along well. They laugh. They can joke with each other. They're serious when they need to be. They're always watching out for each other's back. That's the whole my brother's keeper mentality. And it's very important having a good crew. We definitely serve the citizens. It becomes very evident during the storms, but we do every single day. We're glad that we have a good job here at JEA and that we are providing power throughout all of Jacksonville.
Impressive. Yeah, I want to call the meeting to order. At this time, have a time of reflections. Have a adoption of the agenda. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. A values moment, Carolyn Griffin.
Carolyn, you might not have your mic on.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay. Good morning. My apologies. Good morning. At JEA, our values are safety, respect, and integrity. And for today's values moment, I want to highlight our value of respect. My name is Carolyn Griffin. I'm the Director of Customer Experience, and I have the pleasure of supporting the departments where customers contact us for service and payment assistance. This includes teams in our residential customer contact department, customer support center, cart written correspondence, and stock outages customer service. In sharing just a brief moment with you, I want to define Webster's definition of respect. It's an act of giving particular attention, more specifically, consideration. When I view the word respect, I'm reminded of my dad and his lessons to my siblings and I of what respect is and its impact to others, all without saying the actual word. As I recall one of my more fonder special learnings from my dad, I think of my 5th grade self. My brother and I, along with our friends, loved to eat dates from the date trees in our neighborhood. We would raid all the trees except one older lady who lived across the street from us. Her name was Mrs. Witherspoon, and she had a full tree of yellow, plump dates. While sitting on the porch one evening, I said to my dad, I'm going to get Miss Witherspoon's dates from her tree. My dad, who is a big man with a gentle spirit and voice, said, she does not want children in her yard, Carolyn. I said, yes, sir, but Daddy, we would throw a stick at the dates, they would drop, and me and my older brother would run very fast in her yard, grab the dates and leave. My dad then said, are you considering Miss Witherspoon's wishes? I thought, I still want those dates. I was already strategizing how to get them when my dad was not at home. 2 days later, on a Saturday morning before cartoons were starting, I went to Miss Witherspoon's yard without my brother. I had my stick and I was ready to go. But my dad's voice of consider stayed in my mind. So instead of going into her yard and taking the date, I went to the door, not lightly because I was scared, and then answered, this is Carolyn, Mr. Lonnie and Miss Gladys's daughter from across the street, when she asked me who was I. When Miss Witherspoon opened the door, I asked her could I have the dates on her tree. She told me no, because she did not want children in her grass, and she slammed the door in my face. I was so sad because I was looking forward to this cartoon snack. I began walking down her walkway and I heard the door reopen. Mrs. Witherspoon called me back and said to me, Carolyn, you can get the dates because you honored me and respectfully asked me for them. Of course I was happy. My father's version of respect was quite different for me as a 5th grader, but is resoundingly the same 50 years later. As leaders, I want to take one more moment of your time and remind each of you, each of us, when interacting with others, our direct reports, our customers, or an elderly lady across the street, to make a meaningful effort to understand how you can demonstrate respect in your discussion and always communicate with consideration of their feelings. Thank you for your time this morning.
With this, we'll hand it to Michael.
Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity. I want to take a quick second and talk a little bit about the responsiveness of the JEA staff. As a district councilman, we regularly hear from constituents about flooding issues, power issues, trees, et cetera. And yesterday was a perfect example. At 9 o'clock yesterday morning, I'm walking the transmission lines with about a half a dozen of your staff between Loretto Road and Marbon, taking a look at some flooding issues. They didn't come to that meeting just to say, this is the problem. They came to this meeting with solutions and options for solutions. And that has been a consistent experience for me in working with JEA staff. They are responsive in a timely fashion in dealing with things. I think it's important to appreciate that. We talk macro here. What I'm talking now is micro in the context of the responsiveness of JEA. And affirms for me, again, why it's so important that it's a municipal utility. Today's a long day for us at council. We're meeting at 3 o'clock as opposed to 5 o'clock. Why? Because it's budget day. We have to push through our budget. And I want to commend Jay and staff for the presentations they made. I think we're not going to see any issues as it relates to the JEA budget today in the process, but I do want to emphasize the importance of the contribution JEA makes to the city, both tangibly and intangibly in terms of the service to this community. So I appreciate the moment. Thank you.
And let me just say this, is we had a strained relationship when, a lot of us with John's leadership got involved. And I commend you, Michael, for you building that relationship. And Jay and his team and the 2,000 employees really have made a difference. But how we rebuilt that trust and relationship has been something that was worked on from both sides. It started with you and the leadership and John and his leadership. And, you know, it's an important partnership. So thank you.
I do, just to add to that, you know, rewriting Article 21 was talking about accountability on the part of the board, talking about transparency, and the opportunities ahead of us. And I think we're living up to that in spades, so I do appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael. Comments from the public. Logan Cross.
My name is Logan Cross. I'm a citizen, and also the chair of the Sierra Club of Northeast Florida, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm speaking to you today with the knowledge that many of our pleadings about getting JEA to commit to carbon emissions reductions have largely gone unheeded. This is evidenced by the recently passed JEA integrated resource plan that made at best a modest commitment to renewable energy, while at the same time committing JEAs to further dependence on fossil fuels by building a new combined cycle natural gas plant. I guess the translation of this is the JEA board and the JEA leadership has no qualms about heeding the urgings of the citizens and the ratepayers. The question that is open to now and for consideration is, we have a new city leadership, a new mayor who acknowledges that climate change is real and that the city needs to do its part in reducing carbon emissions. So the question becomes is, will the JEA board heed this and take action to reduce carbon emissions, or will it largely ignore this reality? The other point I want to make, and this will be, is that JEA is, and you as a leadership, is approaching an inflection point, a point where you'll really need to decide which direction you will take. Will you further commit to fossil fuel dependence? Or will you acknowledge that climate change is actually real, becoming more urgent every day, and then take substantive steps to reduce carbon emissions? Finally, I want to close by saying that both this JEA board and the JEA leadership has become awfully fond of using a phrase that is, we will not commit to a goal unless we are sure that it can be accomplished. If you really distill that down, it's really little more than a convenient excuse justifying inaction and resistance to change. Really, in effect, it's being used to shield JEA from making any commitments that are really ambitious and substantive. Now, I want you to say, and first when I thought about that statement, I started to characterize it as a hollow statement. But really, it's not a hollow statement. It seems to reflect the philosophy, the prevailing philosophy guiding JEA. You can continue using that statement. And let me just say this, and I should have pointed out, that was not overly surprising coming from the JEA leadership, but it is very surprising that to hear the JEA board use this statement, because you are composed of people who are in leadership roles, both in higher education, in the military, and in businesses. And I think you know that unless you're willing to push yourself a bit, set ambitious goals, you're really putting your entity in jeopardy. You can continue using that phrase, but I want you to know that we're hearing it and we're taking it for what it is. It's essentially a lame excuse for inaction and maintaining the status quo. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Logan. Lucy Sonnenberg.
Good morning. I'm Lucy Sonnenberg, as you know, and I'm here to talk to you today about the resolution developed for you by JEA staff and a second resolution developed by Bud Parrott and me with input from others that sits in front of you. But we'll offer a few details, or several details about the specifics of that alternate resolution. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the differences in the approaches between the two. But first, some thank yous. Thank you, board, as always, for welcoming us and hearing your time and hearing our public comments. A very deep thanks to Laura Shepis, Jay Stowe, for a lengthy conversation with me and Bud about these resolutions. And finally, thank you, board, for hearing our plea for a more explicit commitment to a clean energy future by JEA and responding by a call for a resolution. There's a lot to like in that resolution. There is a direct acknowledgement of the importance of addressing climate change and reducing carbon emissions. It recognizes the need to transition to cleaner and more sustainable energy sources. It resolves not to weaken those really rigorous 2030 goals. It also resolves to help customers reduce their carbon footprints, in part by promising to update policies to make it easier for customers to purchase solar energy. It promises regular updates and a continuous evaluation with an eye to accelerating environmental stewardship goals. All of these things are laudable. Of course, they're wonderful. And there's no conflict whatsoever between this resolution and the one we would like for you to consider. So why don't we love it? Why do we find it insufficient? I tell you, it's partly because it feels less like a vision statement and more just a simple recognition of the need to sustain the effort to reduce carbon emissions. While this is extremely true, very true, it seems a very minimal response to a huge global problem that's worsening every day. It's more a general guidance on processes and procedures. There's little that tells us what you hope to achieve. And the actions described in your resolution may or may not lead to significant or even adequate results. It doesn't address JEA's fossil fuel use in the future at all. Do you see JEA burning coal in 2050, natural gas? Your resolution just doesn't tell us that. Finally, it resolves to include clean energy targets in your resource plans, yet it offers no specific energy targets to consider in those resource plans. Without long-term benchmarks and timelines, it's unclear what endpoints are acceptable to you. It's unclear what you will find intolerable and what you will strive for. After hearing Bud's description of our very significantly different approach, we hope you will consider the value of including specific and measurable clean energy goals in your resolution, a resolution that should be worthy of the state's largest and the nation's 8th largest utility. Lead the way. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry I went over.
Thank you so much. Bud, Para.
Speak and for paying attention, because you have done that and we appreciate that. JEA's 2023 IRP set achievable, measurable stretch goals for 2030, including 35% clean energy, including 1,275 megawatts of solar by 2030, 100% clean energy for JEA's facilities, to retire Northside 3, a 40-year-old gas unit, and to reduce carbon emissions by 80% from 2005 levels. JEA staff is now preparing plans to meet these goals, and we have great confidence that they'll do that and that JEA will be able to meet these goals. JEA staff has also prepared a proposed board resolution on environmental stewardship beyond 2030. It's well written and we don't have any argument with it, except that there are no numbers. There are no measurable goals, and there's really only one date in it, and that is to do another integrated resource plan by 2030. I'm sorry, by 2026. And just for example, the number one, the first thing that is suggested for the board to commit to, I'll just read it to you. Plan for the future. JEA will develop recommendations for asset decisions based on integrated operational and financial plans that align to JEA's strategic direction that will not revert from its 2030 IRP goals. Got that, what you're committing to? So the resolution that Lucy and I have proposed, and this is the third time we've handed this out to you. We appreciate you doing that. It has actual goals with numbers and dates. And so this is what we ask you to consider. We ask that you have measurable goals. They're not easy, but they're doable. Retire JEA's last 2 coal units by 2035. That's 12 years from now, when they'll be about 35 years old. And JEA's IRP shows that in 2030, JEA will get about 3% of its energy from these 2 coal units. So they're really not a big deal to JEA. We know that there's a staff of some more than 200 people that work at Northside, and that's an important thing to consider. JEA has 12 years to work on that, to retire these units by 2035. And we know that JEA is concerned about losing its staff, which is well-trained and valuable to JEA. So I think they have places to use these people. We ask you to attempt to achieve 5% customer-owned rooftop solar by 2035, and then provide a path for community microgrids by 2040. We're asking that we establish a plan to reach 95% clean energy by 2045, and establish a plan to reach 0 carbon emissions by 2050. None of those things are too difficult for JEA to do. The last 2 are just established plans. We ask the board to consider setting measurable goals, and we thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Bud. Sariah?
Good morning. My name is Sariah Era, and I am the Advocacy Specialist for the St. Johns Riverkeeper. On behalf of our members, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. As a Gen Z, I also want to take this opportunity to speak on behalf of my generation, who will have to deal with the results of how JEA deals with climate change. Hurricane Ian and Nicole, along with its predecessors Matthew and Irma, underscored the importance of addressing the underlying causes of climate change. As we are in peak hurricane season, it is a stark reminder of the urgent need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to protect the future of our community and our economy. We appreciate JEA's acknowledgement of the importance of addressing climate change and reducing carbon emissions with the staff proposed resolution titled Commitment to Environmental Stewardship, Customer Solutions, and Integrated Resource Planning for Long-Term Lower Carbon Emissions. We also thank you for recognizing that both your customers and the community are calling for stronger actions to address the root causes of climate change. Unfortunately, the resolution as proposed does not create the momentum that is needed. We do not see measurable goals beyond 2030, and no target dates except for another IRP in 2026 are included. Without measurable goals, this resolution does not provide a prudent path forward, nor assurances that JEA will do all you can to chart a course to phase out the use of fossil fuels. We respectfully ask that your resolution set measurable goals with deliverable dates beyond 2030. For example, set goals for incorporating clean energy targets to reduce JEA's carbon footprint for 2035 and 2040, set real targets for assisting customers in installing renewable solar, define how and when JEA will accelerate its environmental stewardship goals, and finally, please set a goal to retire JEA's last 2 coal generating units by 2035 when they will be 35 years old. Your dedication to investing in strategies to address the root cause of climate change will make our community and our river more resilient. It is critical to my generation's future and for a healthy foundation for our children and our grandchildren. We look to you for your leadership and for the opportunity to work together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Angela?
Hello, good morning. Angela DeMonbren, Chief Operating Officer with Solar United Neighbors, a national nonprofit helping individuals make informed decisions with regard to customer-owned rooftop solar. Also Jacksonville resident. We commend JEA for including local organizations in their IRP planning process. We believe this was a step in the right direction, but stronger commitment to customers' right to produce their own energy and invest in their own resilience is needed. JEA should adopt a 5% rooftop solar goal and restore net metering to allow customers to get a fair credit for their own solar systems sharing electricity back to the grid. This would boost the local economy, bring back jobs that have been lost since the end of the net metering policy, as well as encourage more diverse adoption of solar energy. Without net metering, solar economics don't pencil out for the most heavily burdened, energy burdened families in the service territory. They are essentially pushed out of the savings. The Special Committee on JEA Matters found that past leadership overestimated even the potential rate of solar adoption by 532% in a successful effort to erode JEA's net metering policy. Even with record growth, net metered customers represent less than 1% of JEA meters. The battery incentive was marketed as a solution for the loss of net metering, yet it has been dissolved and net metering is still not restored. Net metering is a fair credit fully supported by 84% of Florida voters across party lines, as well as defended by the Public Service Commission. It's time to give Jacksonville residents the opportunity to invest in their homes and control their utility bills. Again, it can start with a 5% rooftop solar goal and restore net metering. Net metering is a win-win for customers and JEA. Customers save money, and JEA can then sell the electricity produced by solar owners to their neighbors. Both work together to help us move toward more clean energy with net metering. Since net metering benefits both customers and JEA and aligns with the city's clean energy goals, why are we still blocking the sun? Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Stephanie?
Good morning. My name is Stephanie Freeman. I am the chair of the St. John's Riverkeeper Board, a riverfront homeowner, and the mom of 2 young children, Jack and Sophia. Climate change threatens the St. John's River, the health of our children, and the future of Northeast Florida's economic prosperity. More intense storms, more flooding, and increased stormwater runoff means more pollution and sewage overflows washing into our river. This increases nutrient pollution that fuels toxic algae blooms and fish kills in our warming waters. Rising waters also cause more septic tanks to fail and salt water to contaminate our aquifer. JEA has the responsibility to provide safe, affordable energy while protecting community health for today and tomorrow. As a leader in the environmental community, I understand how hard it is to provide balance, protecting our waterways and our economic future. Working together as a community, I am certain we can make it happen, though. It has never been more advantageous to invest in clean energy programs and to develop a strategy to strike this critical balance. To provide a robust economic future for your employees, to provide stable, affordable energy for your customers, to provide weatherization incentives, to reduce bills for those who need it most, while improving their quality of life, health, and the bottom line. To provide true environmental stewardship that protects our river, our air, and water today, and our community's future. But this does not happen without measurable goals. Today, on behalf of the St. John's Riverkeeper Board, and on behalf of my own children, we ask JEA to adopt measurable goals to reduce JEA's environmental impact by replacing the Northside coal units with zero carbon capacity. Our future is counting on you. Thank you. One last thing, Lisa Reinemann, our riverkeeper, could not be here today, unfortunately. Both of her sons tested positive with COVID this morning. So she was trying to log in this morning to provide a comment. I'm not sure if that's possible or not.
What we were going to do is we have one more in-person speaker, and then we'll go virtual speakers. And Lisa is on the virtual.
Okay, and if that's not possible, if I could possibly read her comments if she's not available, that would be great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yes. Josh?
Hello. Thank you so much to the board for allowing me to speak today. My name is Dr. Joshua Malco, Associate Professor at University of North Florida, a citizen of Jacksonville and father to Lucas and Sophia. Two comments today. First, I want to applaud JEA staff for putting together this environmental stewardship resolution. I also want to thank the board members and members of the community, several from public comment today, that have pushed for a resolution like this. So I urge the board to pass the resolution, although incorporating a lot of the suggestions we just heard from Lucy, Bud, and other public comments. Second point I want to bring up is to talk about what I see as really the primary bottleneck in transitioning to clean energy. It's something Chair Stein brings up a lot, and that is transmission, okay? And transmission lines are expensive. They take a long time to get permitted and built, and we'll need many more of them in the next decade. But I want to make sure the board knows there are ways to get much more out of our existing transmission lines, which really represents low-hanging fruit to increase our transmission capacity, relieve congestion, and decrease the total cost of transmission upgrades that get passed on to consumers. Okay, these types of upgrades can really add between 20 and 50% to our transmission capacity that exists and save us a lot of money. Okay, I'm talking about advanced technologies that have been used in Europe for over a decade, technologies with really nerdy sounding names, right? Like dynamic line ratings, power flow controls, topology optimization, but you don't need to know how these things work, just that they can save us money and maximize the capacity of existing transmission systems. So whenever transmission comes up, I just ask the board to really ask staff about these new technologies. Are we using them, right? If not, what's the potential of using them? And when we really forecast the build out of our transmission system, how can we incorporate these technologies to maybe offset building of all new lines? That will cost 100 times more than these technologies. The first electric utility to install and integrate these technologies just won the Edison Award, the highest honor bestowed on a utility from Edison Electric Institute. Okay, so JEA can really be at the leading edge of this technology if we start really evaluating what are the possibilities now for our municipal utility to add these. These are relatively cheap to add, but there's also federal money to pay for them. Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act allocated $14 billion in grants from DOE that these technologies are eligible for. The Inflation Reduction Act added money through loan programs and grants for transmission upgrades, for which these grid enhancing technologies could be financed. So whenever the topic of transmission comes up, just ask and have a conversation about using the latest, greatest technologies to save our consumers money, to increase reliability, and avoid unnecessary overbuild out of transmission. We're going to have to build so many more transmission lines as it is, but how can we also leverage the best technology to help us get there at least cost to consumers? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now can we go to the virtual?
Lisa, you now have the floor.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Reinemann. I'm the St. Johns Riverkeeper. And as Stephanie said, I'm home with 2 sick boys, and I didn't want to share anything with you beyond the following comments. So on behalf of my members, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you virtually today. First, we appreciate your service and your leadership in charting a more resilient and clean energy course for Jacksonville's future. We are all in this boat together. Northeast Florida is our community. It's the home to our children, the foundation of our livelihoods, and our overall quality of life. We all have a vested interest in Jacksonville being as healthy and financially strong as possible. We also all have a vested interest in our public utilities' ability to provide clean, affordable energy. JEA is a job provider, a community advocate, a social worker, an environmental steward, and an economic driver. It is JEA's responsibility to provide stable, affordable energy that is also safe for our families, safe for our everyday lives, our health, and for our future. JEA holds the key to protecting Northeast Florida's environment, our air, our water, and our river, so families are safe today, which contributes to Jacksonville's long-term quality of life and robust economic growth. JEA also holds the key to responding locally to our climate challenge. For all of these reasons, community leaders invested hundreds of hours to fully understand and participate in JEA's IRP process, to provide reasonable, responsible recommendations. We, nor did any of the other members, ask for JEA to commit to renewable energy regardless of the cost. We did not ask JEA to commit to clean energy at the expense of ratepayers, customers, and dependability. We did ask for a full review of all costs, including the environmental cost, the cost of rising temperatures, human health cost, and pollution and a warming planet, and the economic cost of prioritizing fossil fuels. Unfortunately, that did not happen. However, JEA can commit now to a robust, transparent due diligence and strategies that will address the causes of climate change while making our community and our river more resilient. JEA can immediately remove the renewable energy bias from its IRP model and fully vet available incentives and energy efficiency programs that will best serve our community's future. Affordable, responsible strategies exist to eliminate ongoing harm and risk to the St. John's while protecting our children from negative health impacts, lowering energy costs for families and businesses, creating clean energy jobs, and providing a healthy environment and economy for future generations. We look forward to this ongoing conversation and your leadership as you identify short-term measurable targets and policies that ensure long-term objectives are met. Thank you for your time today.
Lisa, thank you so much. I hope your kids get better. Yes.
Thank you.
Mark, you now have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Mark Zerman. I'm the energy manager for Commercial Metals. We have a facility in Baldwin. It's the steel mill. Had three items. First one, would like to kind of have everybody reflect on where we've come from and where we are now. From my personal opinion, we're in a substantially better place than we were prior to Jay coming on board and the changes that the board have made. So I think directionally we're improving, and it's a lot better spot. So I'll just start with that. Second item, on rates. I'm not quite sure that we've seen the $14 million shortfall, if that has been caused by the structural discrepancies in rates. And so to that point, I'm not quite sure the allocation of that makeup is done correctly. Finally, if you are trying to make up in a short-term funding issue to adjust rates, rate gradualism does not have you doing that by collecting 50% in one step. No entity can, absorb an 8.5% rate increase in this environment. And then the other item on rates, I also think that expansion of renewables, I think JEA's IRP has set out very good goals. Having a one-size-fits-all renewable requirement does not work in any kind of global environment. We are energy-intensive, trade exposed, and a lot of our competition does not have the same view of the environment that some of the folks today have expressed. And then finally, we believe that the city contribution should be shown as a single line item on invoices. It ties out well with the view of transparency that we've got recently. And we believe that it should be because we think it is a substantial part of rates, and it should be shown like the other taxes that are currently on our invoices. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Mark. Is there any other virtual comments?
Not at this time.
Okay. With that, I'll hand it to Jay.
Thank you. Thank you and good morning. I want to thank all of the people that have been involved with our integrated resource planning efforts over the last couple of years, and the continuation of your bringing up what are, I believe, things that help make us more thoughtful in our process. Welcome to the last board meeting of the fiscal year 23. We are looking at our next board meeting will be the beginning of fiscal year 24, and we will have time to review this year, both operationally, financially, as we get into those details. The first week of October, marks APPA's Public Power Week, and it's also National Customer Service Week. We saw some videos at the beginning that kind of pointed out some of the things that are happening. JEA is one of 2,000 public power utilities across the nation that serve 49 million Americans. The theme for APPA's Public Power Week this year is Building for the Future, really to showcase how public power utilities are planning to offer reliable, affordable, sustainable, and customer-focused service for many years to come, which is consistent with what we are trying to do in everything that we do. This is why, and one of our strategic focus areas really is to earn customer loyalty. As you saw in that opening video, while our customer group is on the front lines helping customers in the lobby, on the phone, at their homes, really anywhere that we serve, they're working to earn trust and deliver business excellence. It takes every single employee at JEA to provide that superior customer service. And as Councilman Boylan pointed out, we are trying to be as proactive as we can and reactive whenever there is an issue so that we can help make things better. We are focused on our strategic objectives, not only to sustain our community, but to help build it. And we're committed to the idea of improving lives and building community. That doesn't only mean building community here. You remember our last board meeting was cut short because the Tuesday morning of our board meeting, the hurricane that was coming was bearing down on us. Only later did the storm move west 60 or 70 miles, and our area was spared significant damage. While we still had some people that were out of power, we had no overflows. We were ready for the storm and prepared. Our storm stock was in good shape in spite of supply chain issues. We were lucky that we didn't need to use many resources, and we had mutual aid partners from Texas, Missouri, and Arkansas to help us with this storm. But one of the lessons learned from this storm is the relationship with some of our contractors. We're frustrated that some of our contractors left before we released them. We were lucky not to have a problem this time, but we will work to make that a better process in the future. Our emergency preparedness team will continue to walk through appropriate after action reports to be sure that we're prepared for the next event. As part of this larger community of public, municipally owned, community owned utilities, we also offer others help in need. While we had help from other areas during the storm, and we were fortunate that we were not tremendously impacted, there were a few places that were not as fortunate. And I want to thank the team of 30 people that traveled to Folkston, Georgia to provide mutual aid and support to our friends at Georgia Power, and the 25 people that went to Taylor County to help Taylor Coastal Utilities and Big Bend Water Authority to restore their collection system, because whenever we need help, people come and help us, and whenever we have the opportunity to provide help, we're able to do that as well. So when we say we're improving lives and building community, it's not just in Northeast Florida, but with everything that we do. But remember, we've been lucky so far this season, but we still have a couple of months left in our hurricane season. So please stay ready, replenish storm supplies, and be sure that we're prepared in case something does come. Much of the discussion today in the public comment surrounded the integrated resource plan, the electric integrated resource plan. We decided that community members should play a key part in our process, and had representatives from 22 organizations that were part of our stakeholder engagement committee. We've also continued to share this integrated resource plan with the community, and have met with over 15 community and civic organizations to share our plans for our electric generation for the next several years. This has allowed the community to continue to provide us feedback, ask questions for us to answer the questions, and in most meetings, really engage the public and audiences in items much more broad than just the integrated resource plan. And I think it's been a good reminder for our team and for the people that have been meeting with the community about how foundational we are to the community. Later on in the agenda, you'll have the opportunity to discuss, consider, and I hope adopt the resolution that's before you to strengthen our commitment to environmental stewardship, customer solutions, and integrated resource planning. While the public comments indicated that we have not set longer-term goals, the shorter term goals are measurable, achievable, and stretch goals. And we're going to keep working on longer term goals in our planning process, including updating our electric IRP in 3 years. One thing that I think is interesting about our integrated resource planning efforts really are that we have an integrated resource plan for water. We have an integrated resource plan for generation on electric. The water integrated resource plan was impacted directly and quickly after it was adopted by outside influence by the legislature in Senate Bill 64. That's not part of our integrated resource plan for water. Our integrated resource plan for electric is focused on generation and not on the transmission side of the business. And I think that we've got to be able to change our mindset to put the integrated portion of the planning back in place. And we're working to have a more complete enterprise planning effort to maintain input from the community on all that we do, but to move from a snapshot in time when we do an integrated resource plan to a more integrated effort across all of our operations and financial planning efforts, making this an ongoing effort that's updated regularly as part of the normal course of business. Another part of our normal course of business is engaging with the community and working with partners in procurement. The 6th annual Jacksonville Small and Emerging Business JSEB Procurement Summit was held on September 8th at the main public library with over 130 people in attendance. We really focused on fiscal year 24 bid opportunities for these small and emerging businesses. Over the past 3 years, we've also tried to expand our focus beyond just the JSEB program, which is focused on small emerging businesses inside of Jacksonville, and expand it to a more broad supplier diversity program to allow diverse suppliers of any size and location to be certified by a third party and then to be part of our overall supplier directory. This effort is bigger than the JSEB program. The JSEB program is something that we've used as a proxy for diversity over years, but now I think we're doing a better job of tracking, reaching out to diverse suppliers. And I think General DeSalvo will talk a little bit more about that in his report on the Finance and Operating Committee. I think I said this, the last meeting of the fiscal year is today. Next meeting is in November. And we're going to try to expand our efforts around planning. We'll talk a little bit about that, moving to a 3-year business plan next year. And this is probably where I should stop my comments for the day. But I want to hit on one more item before I finish. I was very pleased that we completed another round of our employee engagement survey a couple of weeks ago. And our results indicate that we're in the same neighborhood that we've been the past couple of rounds in May of 2022 and in February of 2023. Haven't seen a dramatic change in our engagement, a slight decrease in the participation from our employees, but in large part, I think it indicates that we're doing well and that we're making good decisions. We've had a slight decline in that participation rate, but I'm pleased that for the most part, the employee engagement survey indicates that we have an engaged workforce, and I think an engaged workforce is important and critical for us to serve our community well. And we'll dive deeper into the engagement survey with the board over the coming months. But we had about 1,500 comments, and while the good news is we had strength in respectful treatment and ethics and values, one of the several of the comments were in line with lack of trust of leadership. And when you read the comments, it oftentimes refers back to a previous leadership team, which is good because it's better to talk about a previous leadership team that you don't trust than the current one. But that previous leadership team's been gone for nearly 3 years, and you as a board have been here for nearly 3.5. I've been here for nearly 3, and our leadership team has been together over that time for fully engaged for a couple of years. And if it was just comments from our employees, then I might have left that and talked to them individually. But some of the comments were frustrated because a few months ago I stopped saying in public that JEA is not for sale. And I don't plan on putting that at the top of my talking points very often. But the real core is that the employees are concerned about the stability of the organization. And we have rating agencies that also are concerned about the stability of our organization. And I believe that you all as board, and Sheriff Stein points this out often, the leadership that our past chair Baker and each of you have provided over the time that you've been here has provided the stability that we need. The governance changes that Councilman Boylan brings up has provided the stability that we need. And I think that our employees deserve to know again that JEA is not for sale. We are stable. We are committed both to environmental stewardship and employee engagement, and we're going to keep on doing that. So I said I wasn't going to say it anymore, but I think I might need to remind everyone that JEA is not for sale. There's no plan for it to be for sale. There's no effort for it to be for sale. Any rumors or stories that this is specifically to employees that you might hear aren't true. And if for any reason you think they are, you have my email and phone number and can call me to talk to me about it. With that, thank you very much for being here, the support that you do, the stability that you provide, and I look forward to talking specifically about the resolution when we get to that item on the agenda. Thank you.
Jay, thank you for your comments. And again, thank you for your leadership and the team's leadership. We have a long way to go to build trust, but I think we are a big way on the road to not only establish we're not for sale, but also we're an organization to be best in class. And these comments we hear from the public, we hear you. We just want to make sure we make the right decisions, and every decision we make is a long-term decision. So don't underestimate comments. We appreciate them. We appreciate them in a positive vein, and we more importantly appreciate the 2,000 employees that represent JEA on a day-to-day basis, and can't give enough comments about the leadership John Baker and Marty Lanahan and Joe DeSalvo made at the beginning to set us in the straight path to where we are heading to the best in class. With that, we'll get a JEA performance update by Issa.
Morning to all. Issa Rodriguez, Senior Manager of Customer Contacts here. I've worked with JEA for 3.5 years. My teams deal with customer inquiries from inbound phone calls in the contact center to face-to-face contacts in the Customer Solutions Center. We are also in charge of our outage center, back-end research support, customer escalations, and correspondence that we receive from our customers. Today's performance update includes data through August 31st, 2023. For this month's update, we are pleased to report that we are seeing both stability and positive trending in the majority of our scorecard metrics, which is a good indication of continued strong performance as we get closer to end of the fiscal year. In August, we conducted a pulse survey to continue tracking employee engagement. The pulse survey is a shortened version of the longer Glint survey that employees have participated in since June of 2022. That allowed us to take a quick pulse on areas of importance to engagement. With over 60% of the workforce responding, results return an overall score of 80. Though this score is 2 points lower than the survey conducted in February, it is still well within our first quartile nationally. With over 1,400 comments from our employees, we will use this data as we develop action plans to continue achieving positive results in employee engagement. We will also continue monitoring employee engagement in fiscal year 24 by routinely conducting these surveys. For our financial metrics, the hotter than expected weather has continued to play a major role in fuel and purchase power expenses. which increased by approximately $11 million this month. Hotter temperatures drove up natural gas-based costs by around $3 million in August, which, while additional sales push expenses higher by $2 million. With only 1 month left in the fiscal year, the major changes to the forecast came from a $2 million increase in the base prices for September and a $1 million increase in solid fuel prices. For capital spend, District Energy Systems is forecasted at $3 million over budget. The board approved a budgetary amendment in June. Our target of $400 million for water and DES is lower than our forecast of $450 million, which is based on current trends, making it at risk. The electric system target of $250 million is slightly below the forecast of $252 million, but this is still within the limit of the capital improvement plan. In August, we had a spike in the average minutes of water pressure less than 30 psi to 20.68. This was due to several water main breaks this morning, including the large water main break near Phillips Highway and Greenland Road. This raised the annual average for the fiscal year to 4.8. We continue to monitor flows and observe the limits of the Consumptive Use Permit, CUP, by using pressure controls to reduce flows and work with media teams to communicate the needs for conservation. We currently have 569 potable water pressure monitoring stations. With current forecasts on our pay-for-performance metrics, pay-for-performance is currently projected at 3.25% of base salaries. Scorecard metric trend data is also provided in today's board package. We're happy to answer any questions you have.
Since, if you go back to the previous slide, you know, the capital spend is $20 million less than what we had budgeted, and the operation and maintenance spend is $50 million less than we had budgeted. Is that going to be true this year, or are we getting closer?
I think what on the forecast for operation and maintenance is on the bottom is 494, and on capital is actually over. Our forecast is 702. So capital is going to be over. The O&M is going to be very close to the target. So we'll know we have several more days in the fiscal year. We'll look at that. I think it's going to be overspent on capital and very close to the target on, or the budget on O&M.
Okay, so you will spend that rest of that money, the 619, you'll spend another 70 million this month?
Yes.
80, yeah. Okay. Okay. So we're planning better.
We're going to work to plan better.
Yeah.
That's part of what I was talking about in my report, the idea that we can look at 3-year business plans and longer term integrated resource planning will get us to a better spot where you all help us set earlier on what the key assumptions will be. And then we, I think we'll be able to better see what our forecast looks like out over a longer period of time. Right now, we look at the efforts that we have on planning, and our key is once we plan well, we have to execute better, and the execution is going to be key in the future.
So in the past, the delta between capital spend and budget was used to pay down debt, and now you're closer to what your budgeted thought process is. That's a big improvement.
It's a significant change in the philosophy of what we're doing, both on O&M and capital. We're working towards having one number for what we are planning, and then executing becomes, I think, key and important to be able to do that well.
Any questions?
Just a comment, but I think it shows, again, better planning and execution, because in the past, the capital spend has been way under from what we planned for. So I think it's a good news story.
There's a lot, we have a lot to do. And we've got to be able to do it all, planning and execution, both a lot better as we keep on going forward.
Okay, General DeSalvo.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Stein. Our Finance and Operations Committee met on 15 September, and along with myself, fellow committee members Marty Lenahan, Rick Morales participated, as well as John Baker. There were 4 topics covered that our committee decided warranted full board discussion, and that'll follow today after I'm done. They were revenue requirements, results, and rate study update, establishment of a debt ceiling for JEA, delegation of authority, and debt management policy. And again, all of these action items will be presented shortly. Additionally, Victor Blackshear briefed pricing policy recommended revisions, and this is really more administrative in nature. It was updating pricing policy changes done in April, legacy charges removed, health insurance reserves updated. Russell Caffey briefed the quarterly financial review, where electric and water metrics were discussed, and really specifically it was days of liquidity, debt service coverage, debt to asset ratio, and fixed charge coverage, and all are looking good. And then, as Jay talked about earlier, Rita Scott briefed Jay's going to be addressing this in the meeting. Rita Scott briefed the supplier diversity program, and JEA is now tracking with more fidelity metrics associated with supply sources from veteran-owned, women-owned, and minority-owned entities, and this includes subcontractors too. And then finally, Lindsay Starner and Stephanie Monroe briefed a newly formatted corporate performance scorecard that covers safety, employee engagement, customer and residential satisfaction, and reliability metrics. And so that was what's happening in the meeting. It was a good meeting.
Agenda.
Second.
Is there discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion passed. Victor?
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Chair and Board. Glad to be here. My name is Victor Blackshear, Director of Financial Planning and Rates, and today I'll be talking to you all about our revenue requirement results and an update on our rate studies. So with the board approved FY24 budget of $822 million, we applied it to our utility basis rate making, and it calls for a target return of $13 million for FY24.
Yeah.
I'll try not to eat it while I'm talking. So to achieve our FY24 revenue requirements, it has to be met by adjusting our rates to achieve our target revenues. And while we're attempting to achieve our target revenues, we're also looking for opportunities to improve our rate.
Can you speak up so we can hear you? Yeah.
Okay. How about speak loud and pull the mic away from me? Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So to improve our revenue requirements, we're adjusting our rates to achieve our target revenues. And by doing that, we also want to look into improving some of our rate structures and revise our tariffs accordingly. So when we took a look at our revenue requirements this summer, we compared it to our projected revenues for FY24. And when we compared our projected revenues to our revenue requirements, we were projecting this summer a shortfall of $14 million. So what we did is we took our revenue requirements and we divided according to our rate classes, from residential all the way to our large industrial customers. And as you can see here, when we look at our rate class level, we're still under collecting from our residential class by $66 million. And we're also under collecting our IXXLD class, which is interruptible service extra large demand class, by $1.3 million. Also, when we took a look at target our revenues, we saw some opportunities to redesign our rates for our interruptible class and our IXXLD class. By addressing these matters, we believe we can close that shortfall of $14 million for targeted revenues. So one of the rates that we're looking to redesign is our interruptible service rider. Our interruptible service rider allows JEA to interrupt service at any time period for certain customers. In exchange, these customers are receiving a lower bill. However, this rider was established back in 1995, and back in 1995, there was the deregulations were under consideration when this rate was put in place. Since then, it's been in place, and we've had about 40 plus service agreements out of the 200 industrial customers that's on this rider. And we have not interrupted these customers for over 10 years. So, and lastly, we haven't really looked at this rate since 2010. All that being said is it was just time for us to take a hard look at this rate and see if there's some opportunities there for us as a utility. So as you can see here, we set our rate design and study objectives, and we got with our rate consultants 1898 to come away with some action items that we think will improve the riders for JEA. When we took a look at the rider, we saw some opportunities here. One is right now the discounts are embedded in the tariff, so it's not transparent. We would like to pull those discounts out of the rate so to be more transparent and we can see it as a credit on the customer's bill. Also, as I stated, this rate has been in place since the late 90s. And back in the late 90s, there was an energy rate discount within it, as well as a 2.5% contract discount. After discussing this with our rate consultants, we come to the conclusion that there's no cost justification for it. So we believe it's time for us to phase the energy rate and contract discounts out soon. And the last piece we looked at was the peaking pricing. Peaking pricing was a mechanism put in the rate to kind of help us recover some of our costs during peaking events on our generation system. When we had conversations with our generations team as well as our customer relationship team, we all came to the conclusion that this component was no longer effective and it was a customer dissatisfied. So we all came to the agreement that it was time also, let's just eliminate the peaking pricing option, as well as in the current rate, there's 2 rate options, which has created a rate inequity between customers within that class. So we also recommend eliminating option B to eliminate the rate inequity, excuse me.
Jay, can you give us an example of what we're talking about here?
So you've got how many customers?
We have about 40 service agreements on this.
Yeah.
This rider.
So the interruptible piece of this, the example is that if we have a peak day, then we can call on these 40 customers and ask them to come off of the electric service, and they come off. And in recognition of that, they get a lower bill, a lower rate for that. But did you say, when's the last time we called on it?
Over 10 years since we have. And when we made that call, we didn't even call all 40, all of the customers on. It was just a handful that we called at that moment.
Okay.
It's a tool that operationally can make sense if you have significant peaks, and with the load profile that we have, we don't really have peaks here like you have in other places. And so when you don't have those peaks, then it doesn't make as much sense. If you had a wider range in weather, then you would see steeper peaks. And there's other systems that I have worked and been involved in, where you have winter, really. You have winter, you have summer. Here, we're pretty stable and don't have significant spikes of peaks. And it, with our load being as flat as it's been for the last 15 years, I think the combination of those things have made this not as valuable for us. And it doesn't make as much sense to provide that discount that we're not getting any value for.
So does that mean we're looking at removing the interruptible portion of this at all, or?
No, sir. We're just looking to revise, as Jay mentioned. There's 3 discounts currently in the rider. There's one that's on the demand, there's one that's on the energy, and then there's one that's overall that's a contract discount. The only 2 discounts we're recommending removing is the energy one and the contract demand. But the demand rate discount will continue with this rider for those customers.
But that would be taken out and shown differently?
Yes.
Okay.
And that gives us the flexibility. If there is a peak, we still have that ability to deal with the demand portion, but the others really haven't made as much sense to have.
John?
The comment we heard from the steel company, I couldn't hear all of it, but it seemed to me like they felt like they were being disproportionately charged, or they were the remedy instead of spreading it out. If we looked at that, is there anything we can do to make, that's a big employer and an important customer. Is there anything we can do to make that more gradual?
Yeah, you can talk about the what we've done working with CMC over the last year or two.
Yes, sir. Could we go to the next slide, and I'll be glad to expound on it. So if you recall back in our last rate hearing earlier this year, we recommended to put a pause on a rate increase on this particular class, the ISSLD class, which is the one customer, which is the steel mill that we're referring to today. Because we felt like, and with discussions with them, we felt like there was an opportunity here to do a better rate design to achieve some better results for both the utility as well as the customer. So where we landed on the base revenue side is this new time-based rate. We haven't quite given it a name yet, but the intent of this rate is really to give it more flexibility to the customer, to shift their production off of our high peak periods to our low peaking periods, which will save the customer money as well as the generation of us as a utility some money as well. So this is the rate that we've been working with CMC on for, I don't know, we've been working through it for several months. And we're still working with them in lockstep. They were with us throughout the process for the cost of service study. They saw those results with our rate consultants. We had those conversations, and we'll continue to have those conversations now while we're going through the rate design. So they've seen this rate proposal that I'm presenting before you now, and they like the idea of having this time of use rate instead of the current rate that they're on today. And then I can show some of the changes from the old rate to this recommended replacement rate on the next slide. So on the new rate right now, I'm calling it the GXXLD DT rate. What we're doing is we're recommending the energy and demand charges be based on time of use periods. So again, what that does, it allows the customer to decide, do they want to have productions during the high peak periods and pay higher prices, or can they shift their productions to a lower, an off-peak period and pay lesser prices for their consumption use. And likewise, the discounts that I stated on the interruptible, we also want to take those discounts and make them transparent on the tariffs. And then likewise, we want to eliminate the peaking pricing also. The last, the new component that we have not done as a utility that we're still taking some time to come through with our customer is the variable hourly fuel charges. What that does, that allows us to share some of the fuel pricing volatility with our customers. And it gives our customers the opportunity to see which hours that they want to run their peaking, which hours they want to run their productions on. So what this does for both the utility and the customer, it gives us both greater transparency in terms of when they want to use their consumption or when they want to consume our product and at what price they want to consume our product. So I believe if we can work through all of the technicalities, I believe it's going to be a win-win for both JEA and for the customers. The last piece I will say here is currently right now, we only have one customer on the IXXLD rate. If we're successful in replacing this rate with this new rate, after we get through a time period of the newness, I believe other customers will also see an opportunity here to get on this rate structure as well.
John, does that answer your question?
Not going in tomorrow as a fait accompli. Is that correct?
That's correct. We're still working with them on this particular one. And we've worked with the customer, and we've had conversations with the customer, with Mark, is this customer. We've responded and worked with him on his specific questions from that F&O committee between then and now. And we will continue to have those conversations, both Victor's team and the key account group. We'll continue to work with them. The other piece of this is, and this is the schedule here, is that we have updates in November, January. I mean, this is not something we ask you to adopt until March for April for it to go into effect. This is a process that we're working through to be sure that everybody is aware of what's going on. And I think it's important. This is another one of these longer range planning tools, because both in the public comments and then today, the way this looks like we're making up for a $14 million shortfall. This is not the last rate change we're going to be recommending. There's others that continue. And so that's an ongoing effort. We need to be able to show what that longer term trajectory is going to look like for the IXLSD in the
ISXLD.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
For that rate, this is something that has actually been requested by the customer for a number of years. And so when we say we've been working with them for months, it's really been much longer term to have these discussions, to offer a rate structure that gives them more flexibility. They've got questions about it, and we need to be sure that we can answer those questions, and we'll keep on doing that over the next couple of months to be sure that we're there. I think this is a gradual change for our residential customers in particular. Last year, whenever we adopted the rate, we talked about adopting a rate change for this class and felt like we had not had enough conversations yet and needed to have more conversations with the customers to be sure that they're aware. So I think it's an ongoing discussion that we'll work with the customer. They're our largest customer that operates in a single site. And this rate, I think, Victor, you just said this rate right now, they're the only customer on this rate. But with the change that we're putting in place, we think that it provides flexibility for other customers that might be able to take advantage of this rate as well. And it allows the cost to be recovered. That's what the cost of service study looks at, to be sure that we're covering it correctly. And right now, this class, while it's a big number that they pay each year, is our cost of service study shows that we're under collecting for them and we're under collecting for the residential classes. And we're trying to balance that. So more conversations with CMC in particular, more conversations with the larger customer group in board meetings over the next several months.
Rick?
And if I can, I'm sorry, I'm joining remotely. It's Marty. There was a lot of conversation at the committee meeting around these proposed rate increases, and we gave the staff some pushback, and we asked them to review some things go forward. But because of the path forward that is represented here, we felt like we had a lot of time to discuss those more broadly with the board as opposed to within the finance committee structure.
Thank you, Marty. Good to see you. Rick?
So, Victor, just want to, Mark was complaining about an 8.5% increase, and that's the number that we saw on the chart. But if they work more off-peak, then it wouldn't be, that would mitigate some of the increase? Okay.
And if they can.
But that's customer driven.
Right, I understand.
Right.
They have opportunities to mitigate the cost.
Thank you. So it sounds like, am I understanding this correctly? There's also a better opportunity on our part to communicate more with the client on when their usage has increased, and what are these actions like? So just being new, is this as simple as turning back their air conditioning a couple degrees, or are we impacting? Would there be serious impact to their business operations?
No, that's a great question. For this customer in particular, they have 3 major facilities, and one of their facilities is very power intensive. So it hits our generation fleet pretty hard when they come online. So on their current rate, which we haven't, but on their current rate, what would happen right now is for some reason we would need to curtail that power. We would impact dramatically their production, because again, one of the facilities really relies a lot on our power for a short period of time. This new rate design, what it does, it really does improve the view for the customer to see when it's going to impact us the most, and give them an opportunity to shift their load if they can. I believe someone mentioned it, if they can shift some of their production to the off-peak period. So it's not as simple as air conditioning for this customer in particular. It's some really heavy equipment use that they do that requires a lot of power. So we're trying to give them a solution where they can see the opportunities where it costs us lower, so it will cost them lower to meet their production demands.
Kwanzaa, I did not welcome you. We as all are excited about you being part of our group. Yes. Yeah.
So I think it's important that conceptually it's like turning off your air condition, but this is 80 megawatts of load that is instantaneous, and it's turned off and on. It is a big enough load that you can see it on our overall load whenever it drops. When you turn your air condition off individually, then we don't see that. We don't see that even whenever you have air conditioning in a building like this turn off. So this has a substantial impact on our operations when we're doing that, and that it's just significantly large swings. That this does provide them flexibility, and you're absolutely right. If they don't monitor that, no, but they're really very good at this, and part of the reason they wanted some of these rate changes was the flexibility that they have that will be able to allow them operational flexibility to be able to do this. If they will know what the rates are, and we will communicate with them, and if they don't take advantage of that, then it will impact their rates one way or the other. But that's what they do. They know. They have a really well-qualified energy. Their team is looking at this every day, and they're really good at this. And when we provide them the flexibility, I think that gives them some opportunities to take advantage of this. But it's it's an individual customer that's very complicated.
Not to belabor it, but his comments don't sound anything like your comments. And we need to make sure that we're not talking past each other. And, you know, when you invest in a huge plant like this, you look at the electricity rate structure and so forth. And then if we just change it and say, well, you know, if you can't live with our new flexibility requirements, you know, we've really hurt them. And I just think they're a big part of this community, and we need to be cognizant of it.
We do, and that's why we'll continue to have the conversation, and then appreciate, again, Mark has been involved with the IRP process. He's been involved with discussions that we've had ongoing, and I think we've improved the relationship, but we are down to the final steps in the process with a rate change that our cost of service study indicates that we're under collecting for that customer. When we under collect for that customer, then we're collecting it from some other customer, and we need to be able to balance that and balance that well. But I hear you, we hear you very closely, and we've had those conversations. We'll continue to have them with not just, this happens to be a rate that affects one customer, but we try to have that same relationship with all of our large customers.
Jay, it sounds like.
Go ahead.
Oh, my apologies. So it sounds like there are 40 customers altogether that could be a part of this and have positive impact because it could create a win-win situation. Is there who on our end watches this? Are there relationship managers, portfolio managers, and is there an opportunity, if this works well for this client, to then turn this into a success story and bring the other 39-ish online? So
I'm going to answer it in reverse. Yes, we can turn it into a success story, but those are two different issues. The 40 customers are under the interruptible rate. This is a separate rate class that only one customer is in. That could grow because with the new plan on the rate structures, there's other customers that are large enough, they may be able to take advantage of this rate as well. But the customer relationship, I think Sheila probably can answer better what that is with our key accounts and how we respond to those.
Yes, great question. All of our largest customers have an assigned account executive, and we monitor what they're paying every month. We provide recommendations for them to spend less with us. We provide recommendations for rebates and other incentives. So to answer your question, each one of those customers has an assigned account executive, and we meet with them regularly.
Marty, Rick, John, Joe, Kwanzaa, anybody have any other questions here? I think this is important, and I think, appreciate the focus that you guys have put on it. Next, we have the establishment of the debt ceiling for JEA.
Good morning, Chair Stein and members of the board. Can you guys hear me pretty well? Okay. I'm Randall Barnes. I'm the treasurer here at JEA. Happy to see you this morning. I'm here to talk about a couple of items that I think are going to improve governance and transparency and the simplicity of how we manage our debt program. The first item is the establishment of a debt ceiling for JEA. Just for some background, according to the charter, the JEA charter, we have to ask the Jacksonville City Council for authorization to issue bonds. And the way that this has happened over time is we have gone through on an incremental basis and looked at our long-range plan and asked for authorization for a certain amount of new money borrowing and a certain amount of refunding borrowing. The last time, it's been a long time since we've actually asked for any authorization from the City Council. The last time we asked was back in 2013 for the electric system. And before that, water and sewer was 2011. So we've had authorization for a long period of time. And as you know, we've been on a path of refinancing for many, many years. We haven't actually issued new money in a very long time. So the impetus for this discussion is that we do have in our fiscal year 24 budget approval from you guys to issue new money bonds to support the water and sewer system and the DES system. So when we started thinking about this, we thought, well, going back, the way that we have been doing it over time is incremental. So in order to know how much debt authorization you actually had to go back in time and look at all the historical ordinances that authorized borrowing at the City Council level, and then subtract out all of the actual bond issues that we had made. So it wasn't very transparent at all. No one in the public or, other than us accounting nerds at JEA could, we keep a spreadsheet that tells us how much authorization we have available. And we have about $200 million currently available on the water and sewer system for new money, and that's not enough, giving the authorization by the board for $353 million in fiscal year 24. So in thinking about this, we thought, well, maybe there's a better way to do it that's more transparent. What about establishing a debt ceiling that's a not to exceed debt outstanding amount? And that amount would take into consideration any activity in the debt portfolio, including retirements of debt, refundings, and anything of that matter, any new issues, anything of that matter. So that so long as we don't exceed that amount outstanding, we would not need to go back to the city council for additional authorization to borrow money. So if you see on this slide here, we in the blue in the middle of the page proposed JEA debt ceiling for each of our systems. We have to do this on a system by system basis. We're proposing $1.9 billion for the electric enterprise, $2.5 billion for water and sewer, and $150 million for district energy system. Now, we didn't just pull these numbers out of thin air. The way that we thought about this is we looked out into the future and taking into consideration the debt as a percentage of assets ratio, which is an important ratio for the rating agencies and also for our pricing policy, that be below 50%. Our target has been 50%. We looked out about 5 years and factored in growth in assets and growth in borrowing in the long-range financial plan and came up with a sort of a not to exceed amount that would keep us at our 50% level for electric and water for the debt to asset ratio. And then separately, the district energy system, it's a growing system that has an amount of capital needs. It's not mature quite yet. So we're proposing $150 million for that one, but that will be evaluated over time as the system becomes more mature and it's more self-sustaining. So I'm showing here on this slide at the end of fiscal year 24, including any new borrowing, what would be left under our debt ceiling if we chose to propose to adopt these debt ceiling amounts. And as you can see, we are still well below, even after that, our 50% metric for fiscal year 24. We've already met with a number, nearly all of the city council members, and the council auditors obviously met with them. And we also mentioned this in the MBRC meeting when we proposed the budget. And another thing that I wanted to make sure that I mentioned was that we plan to pair this with the annual authorization of our budget, so that this is something that we do every single year. We show what our debt ceiling is, how much debt we have outstanding, and how much available authorization there is, so that everyone can see it. They don't have to go do some calculations by pulling up old ordinances, and just much more transparent for not just this board and the council, but also for any ratepayers and anyone who's interested. And then if you'll show the next slide, I did want to kind of expound on the significant.
But go back, Randall, go back to the last slide.
Sure.
The one thing that's not in here is off-balance sheet, which is Vogel. How do you guys look at that, and how do you think through that, obligation? Sure.
Well, that liability is captured in a fixed charge coverage ratio that is also reviewed by the rating agencies. And so that's something that it's akin to a debt service coverage type ratio. But we do review that as we go forward, and it's taken into account with how much debt we have outstanding. But it's it's not the one that we were keying on specifically for creating this debt ceiling. And one important thing to note is this is just a debt ceiling that's approval at the council level. Obviously, we have to come to this board for any approval of any debt issuance. that would have to be below whatever this debt ceiling is. So this is not saying we're going to go issue or have $4.5 billion of debt tomorrow. This is saying, hey, the council is or the city council is going to approve us to have these different amounts for each system outstanding at any one time, and anything over and above that would have to go back to them.
I'm fine with that. I just want to understand.
Sure.
How that fits in.
Sure.
Ted, do you have any comments or?
I mean, like Randall said, I think this offers a way for us to be more transparent about how much debt we have outstanding at any point in time, and then, you know, match it against that ceiling that we set for ourselves. And you know, for this we have keyed on the debt to asset ratio, but as we put together proposals and as we put together the budget, which this all kind of fits hand in glove with, we look at all of those different kinds of ratios. I mean, we have to be cognizant of the coverage ratios and the fixed cost coverage ratios and a number of other financial indicators that we know that rating agencies will be reviewing on us annually. And so, you know, it is, it's a lot of plates spinning at one time that we have to keep spinning. So
next slide.
Real quick.
Wait,
this does not include Vogel.
No, it does not. This is just debt outstanding.
Yeah, it's a fixed charge is how you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, evaluate that. John?
I understand what we're trying to do, and I appreciate it. 2 comments. I would sure make sure that we have run this by the rating agencies, because it would look like a red flag that you were going to issue $1.5 billion more debt. And whether or not we intend to do that or not is very relevant to them. So make sure they're on board with that. And the second thing, you know, a debt ceiling is supposed to be something that constricts you a little bit, or that where you don't have unlimited credit cards. And $1.5 billion extra strikes me as a little too much slack. If I was city council, I wouldn't be too happy about that.
Ted, do you want to answer that, or Randall?
Yeah, I would just say, you know, actually this chart I think illustrates sort of historically where we've been and where we are. And obviously we've had a substantial pay down of debt over time. And at the bottom of the chart, you can see a table that shows our debt to asset ratios over time. So we were going from near 90% early, you know, 12, 14 years ago to now below 50% on the electric side, and almost 70% on the water and sewer side, down to 36% at this point. And so the combined debt ceiling that we're proposing is well below our peaks, and it also takes into consideration a significant capital program on the water and sewer side coming up, yet still staying below our 50% debt to asset ratio. So we need to give ourselves at least enough leeway with the significant capital program coming up, without needing to go back to the city council, and asking for additional ceiling in the near future. But this would still also, sorry, Jay, this still is going to be extremely transparent. So it's going to be every single year we're going to have this in front of the city council so that they will see where we are from a standpoint of the ceiling and the debt outstanding.
I hear what you're saying on this. I think this has because of the formula that we're using to stay below the 50%, that's the cap that helps control it. That's the first thing. The second thing is that this is another one of the times where we've done a really good job of presenting you from 2023 to 2009, what our percent was, what our level of debt was. And as I talked about earlier in the meeting, having a planning so we can show where we're headed. And that's what we'll show to the rating agencies. And that's what we'll show to you, is that we're not going to present like an open checkbook of, we're going to run this number at the full debt ceiling. We'll be making sure that we have the key planning assumptions for us to look at and look at how we use the debt. So we have a lot of major projects that are coming up that we have to be able to plan for and have in place. And this really helps give, I would take it the other direction, the comfort of knowing what that limit is, because quite frankly, if we get to a place, debt ceiling itself has got it's got a bad rap because of the way it is affected nationally. This is just a tool for us to be able to use to stay flexible and be able to respond to our customer needs as we go forward. That was the way that I would think about it.
Not only the customer needs, you know, we've got a transition going on of the infrastructure we're going to have to build out. But on the water and sewer side, on the growth, and on the electrical side, transitioning from old used assets and old used transmission lines to new. And this is capital intensive. So I hear you, John. I think you make some good points. And I feel more comfortable that Vogel is part of the fixed charge ratio that we're monitoring. But any other questions, Michael?
Yeah, Bobby, as you know, Chair, I don't typically weigh in conversations here, but since this is particularly relevant to the council, I do appreciate the transparency and the conversations we've had about this. My only caution with the transition of a new administration and the significant number of new council members, they're drinking from a fire hose still. So I would just pay particular attention that when we bring it before the council, that we know the answer to the question before we ask it. So the communication and the ongoing conversation with council members, I think, is going to be critical to the success of this. And you're right, John. I think the misconception of going to be, well, we're raising the price of the level of the checkbook, and I don't think that's the intent here. As Jay correctly pointed out, we can demonstrate the practice over time, and the viability this allows us, I think, is going to be important in that messaging to the council. Thank you.
What you're saying is one-on-one communication with council members.
Yes.
and
have a confidence in where they stand on this matter before we bring it for us.
I feel confident that Laura, Shepis, and Kurt have heard that message loud and clear.
But our big barometers, the rating agencies, and I think all in this room are focused on keeping our high ratings is important. So I think everybody, both management and board members, are cognizant of keeping the rating agencies feeling comfortable where we're heading. Yep.
Yeah, if I may just make one quick comment. We have had very good conversations with the council members that we've met with, I think 15 at this point. Everyone understands what we're trying to do here and is very supportive. And then finally, I wanted to say that the rating agencies will see this as a positive. This is us putting a cap on how much we can issue, and they like knowing that we've thought about and have a cap out there that we can't go above.
Do we want to go ahead and move the establishment of debt ceiling for JEA and then move on down? Is there a motion? Second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, delegation of authority.
Okay, thank you very much. The next item is delegation of authority to issue bonds. You may recall earlier this year in January, we came forward with a request and was approved the delegation of authority to issue refunding bonds for the next 3 years. It was for a 3-year time period. And so that's historically how we've done it here at JEA. We've we've gone out and looked, and first of all, there's always a delegation of authority for refunding bonds and separately for new money bonds. So we needed to come to you for delegation of authority anyway for the new money borrowings that we have coming up in the next fiscal year. And historically, we had done a 3-year delegation. When we started thinking about this, we thought, well, it would make more sense if we paired this delegation of authority to issue bonds, and this is a delegation to the managing director and CEO to go into the market during a period of time when it's most advantageous to JEA. And the reason for that is because the markets change every single day. So it's very difficult to plan a bond issuance around a board meeting. And so this just gives us certain parameters that we must work within, but also the flexibility to time the bond issue so that it's most advantageous to us. But in thinking about how it would make more sense to do this delegation, we thought it made more sense to do this on an annual basis because every year we're going through and putting together a budget that includes some potential new bond issuance. This year for fiscal year 24, it included $353 million for water and wastewater and $22 million for district energy system. And so what we're asking for here is to basically repeal and replace the authorization that we got in January for 3 years, and to have a new delegation of authority to the managing director and CEO for refunding of any outstanding variable rate debt or fixing out of revolver draws. If it makes sense, it would have to be in compliance with our debt management policy, obviously. And then the new money authorization for water, wastewater, and the district energy system in the amounts of $353 million and $22 million for DES, just for one fiscal year. And then that way, we'll do what we do during the fiscal year 24. We'll have a new delegation of authority along with the budget that you'll approve next year for fiscal year 25. That'll include another delegation of authority for the next fiscal year. It's just a more transparent way of doing it. Everyone can see how much borrowing we're authorizing for the next fiscal year, and it's only good for a single fiscal year. So happy to entertain any questions you might have on that.
Any questions? Motion?
Move approval.
Second? Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Debt management policy.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. My name's AJ Soto. I work for the Treasury Department. Actually work for Randall, my boss right here next to me. I'm here to discuss revisions to our debt management policy. Our debt management policy provides broad guidance and enables sound management, control, and oversight of our debt while facilitating ongoing access to the capital markets necessary to fund future capital projects. The policy was last revised in 2019. Revisions to the policy were necessary due to regulatory and governance changes. Changes made in this revision include the inclusion of the SOFR index as the replacement benchmark for LIBOR, which was discontinued on June 30th of 2023, updating references to include the new Financial Instruments and Services Directive of the JEA's Procurement Code, incorporating changes to the debt authorization process to include annual approval of not to exceed debt outstanding amounts, adjustment of the annual plan of finance to a 3-year period, clarifying that the use of swaps and other hedging instruments used to manage the debt portfolio is optional and not required. And we had various other minor edits to simplify the language and provide clarity. No limits or decision rules were changed as part of this revision. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board might have on this item.
Any questions? Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, guys. Consideration of environmental stewardship resolution. Jay?
So I'll kick this off, but what I hope is that we can answer any questions and have whatever conversation that the board might want to have on this. Again, as I said earlier, appreciate the input that we've had for the last couple of years on this, on the integrated resource plan for electric. Remind the board that the adoption that you made in April, setting the what we believe are aggressive goals that are both measurable, achievable, and stretch. With the 35% clean energy, reducing carbon dioxide emissions by 80%, I think are important steps in our process. We also have in this resolution, as some of the speakers talked about, specific activities that will allow us to update our policies and move in the direction, quite frankly, of some of the goals that the group has put in place for us. I think the integrated resource plan itself did have a longer term view and went out to 2040 something in the process, and some of the scenarios that were looked at did have the zero carbon emission. It had all solar. Our model was looking at what the least cost alternatives were with the constraints that we put on it, and felt very comfortable that the constraints that we put on it for the 2030 timeframe made sense for us, and are also more aggressive than many other utilities and cities in the state. And so with that, I think that we've had this in front of you now for a couple of meetings. You've heard from the group of people that were representing in large part, the environmental community on our stakeholder group. This was from early on in our IRP process. We talked about having a shorter term goals of 2030 as our target. So I don't believe was a surprise as we ended the program and ended the process for us to be looking at this as our initial target. When we adopted this, you all requested that we try to put some more emphasis on this. And this also supports the planning process that we're talking about to be sure that we're looking at what the longer term plans are. And I think one of the more important pieces of this is to come back with a specific updated IRP in 3 years, and then another updated IRP in 3 years that will help us be able to make more stronger commitments that will really allow us to adjust those operational and financial targets and stay on the right trajectory while we serve our customers with reasonable rates and focus on the environmental stewardship of the community. This is a difficult balancing act, and I think that we've navigated that fairly well with the direction that you all have given us and the support and direction that we got from the stakeholder group itself. So with that, I'm open to any questions. Some of the leadership team might be better able to answer some of the questions you might have, and we would recommend approval of this board resolution.
Comments?
Just one of the items that we heard from the public surrounded net metering and individual solar and so forth, which, I think is, I'd love to understand more of how that really works and why our policies are what they are. I understand they've changed over time.
They have changed over time. The short version, and I'm going to watch people nod their heads if I get this right. The short version of the net metering is in essence that if you have a generator behind your meter that whenever it produces power, it comes back onto our system and you get paid whatever the retail rate is. Our policy is if you put electricity back onto the system, we pay you what is in essence avoided fuel cost. Instead of the full retail rate, we pay you the fuel cost. If you use that electricity behind the meter and it doesn't come back on the system, then you avoid the full retail rate for that period of time that you're using it. So that's the difference is full retail rate net metering. Avoided fuel cost is in essence what our policy is. We have been working with a group to have a report on our distributed energy resource readiness so that we can support. One of the problems is that we can't pick some of these goals without systems in place to support them, but we're looking at ways to be able to support distributed energy so that customers, both residential, commercial, would have more flexibility to be able to use solar or other generation on their site. We're also looking at, through the rate studies and a group looking at the value of distributed energy resources to try to answer the question, we believe that retail net metering is too high for us to give you because we still have to have the resources in place, distribution system transformers and other parts and pieces of the system to be able to supply electricity. The community groups, and at the risk of putting words in their mouth, would argue that avoided fuel is too low. So if avoided fuel is too low and retail is too high, then the answer is somewhere in between. And we're looking at what the value of distributed energy resources are so that we can get that to the right place and encourage appropriately distributed energy resources for our customers, which was a lot longer answer than I could have gone with on just the net metering, but it impacts so many other things.
I appreciate that. We were in college, we did a big study and we were trying to use old water wheel in South Carolina to produce electricity, and all they were willing to pay us was the marginal cost of what it would take for them to produce that additional electricity, because they were still responsible for the entire distribution system. So there's a number in there that we still have to provide it. So I can understand, but I didn't. So we do pay the fuel cost, but that's it.
It's an avoided fuel
right
cost. That's right.
Okay.
John?
As I heard the public, their beef was that we weren't willing to put specific numbers in our goals, not in the general spirit of our environmental thing. And I get that. I mean, I'm kind of a specific goal type of guy, but this is, I want you to correct me if I say this wrong, but as I understand it, as part of the IRP, y'all went through different scenarios, including all renewables, everything, and you filtered out where you were having to make assumptions that were not current technology. You said we can't make that as a goal because the technology is not available. That strikes me as very fair and reasonable as long as we keep looking at it. And I think it would be interesting if we had a board meeting that went through some of those scenarios and kind of get us up more to speed on that.
But one thing to follow your point, John, is one of the lessons learned is Plant Vogtle. I mean, the project was $15 billion over budget. It took longer than we thought. And I think that Jay and his team are focused on what we heard today, but we got to make smart decisions, because when we make a decision today, most of what we're doing, whether it's transmission, hydrogen, these small nuclear reactors, they take 8 to 10 years to build, and this transition is going to take time. And if we make quick decisions and new technology takes over, the cost of bad decisions. So I understand, and I think everybody on this board wants to make this transition, but a lot of new technology is coming to fore every day, and these decisions we make take time. So I think it's going to be, we're going to have to take some risk, and we're going to have to push these guys to be on top of what is there and what is the opportunity. But some basics is we might have to update our existing transmission lines. We might have to build new ones, which is expensive. So we've got, this is not just an easy say, we want to transition tomorrow. It's a long-term process.
Bobby, can
Pardon?
permission to speak? Sorry again from the probably virtual voice of God here, but I want to take us back to April when we began discussing and socializing the IRP results. And I kind of feel responsible for this resolution. So I'd like to speak to the intent of what I said in the April meeting. And what I said in the April meeting is I think that this body needed to create a resolution that indicates to the public that we are listening to your voices. And I never intended to, at this juncture, in this stage in our evolution as a board, indicate that we are prepared to put hard targets in place. What I do think I said, and we can go back in the tapes again, was we need to make sure the public understands that we are listening, and we will begin to socialize the IRP process for the future, which we've done. I think we've done that at every meeting, and that we will begin exploring alternatives. And I'll give you my passion project, and it's solar. As much as I love solar, I feel as a volunteer, it would be irresponsible for me to target a future board member with a specific target on solar when I have no idea, because I've exported at my house, how I can even do it from a cost perspective right now. So I would challenge us to think through the fact that we are listening, and that we are going to engage in a new IRP. And I've asked Jay to find some time, maybe in a future retreat, where we can actually workshop solar and we can learn a little bit more about solar before we start putting hard targets on a future board. And I mean, I don't know where my term will be when we are comfortable enough putting a target. And I hope that when we get the technology and understand the cost, that we could come out with a bold statement, more than 5%. What if we get 10%? But I don't even know, what that looks like. And as a business person, someone in their comments alluded to us as being business people. I would never pony up for something. I have no idea how I'm going to get there, especially if I am putting that responsibility on a future board.
Yeah, just to pile on. One, I think this hearing from all the stakeholders is extremely valuable, and hopefully that continues. I think we need to reemphasize this is an ongoing process. So this is the first of many steps we're going to take, and it's a continuous process. And I think we need to make sure everybody understands that the present resolution we're proposing right now, when there's changes in technology, when the environment changes, all these other key factors, of course, we're going to re-adjourn and readdress and update as we can. I think there's a huge disconnect between some of the stakeholders' definition of aspirational and what our definition of aspirational are. And I'm sort of going to, this gets back to Marty's comments a little bit. I think our board's being aspirational, but we're also accountable. And we just got to be very careful. We can put a goal out there of something 100% zero carbon by 2050, whatever. But if we have no idea how the heck we're going to get there, that's not being responsible, because we're accountable for that. And that's where I think we've got to just make sure, and that keeps us from making promises we can't keep, et cetera. And this gap will close as technology improves, our knowledge improves, and we get a better handle on this. But I hope people don't confuse thinking that we're being under aspirational just because we're less committed. It's not the case. We're being pragmatic, and we're from an accountability point of view, we have to keep that in mind.
Points. Kwanzaa, do you have any comments, thoughts?
A question, yes. So I see that there's noted stakeholder meetings in future IRP processes. I'm wondering, so 2026 is the next plan. When does the process begin, and how do we keep the public's voice alive and participating and having valuable input in what the next round would look like?
Yeah, so this process started, the first stakeholder meeting was in January of 22. We adopted the plan in the end of April of 23, and then we had our final stakeholder meeting with a large community group in May, the end of May of 23. And since then, we've met with 14 or 15 different community groups, from civic organizations to some of the CPAC, some of the community neighborhood associations. And we will continue to do that. We met most recently yesterday with First Coast Manufacturing Group. And so we'll continue to get even broader stakeholder input as we move forward. The integrated resource plan itself on electric we've committed to having an updated plan in 3 years. The last one took about 20 months. So we are, surprisingly enough, within a year, we will need to start that process again. I think we can do it more quickly because we've got some work underneath us, and we're working to have a planning group to be able to look at these things not at a distinct period in time, but really ongoing, more enterprise planning efforts. So the stakeholders will still be involved. It's an important part of this, and it's one that we talked about having early on, and the board was aware of that and has been hearing from the committees. And so we were focused on being sure that we looked at all of the different scenarios that we could look at, and added, because of the stakeholder group, we added one of the scenarios was basically the model that they asked for and had. So that was one of our scenarios. Back to your question, we did have a scenario that had zero carbon, and that was, and so we will continue to have stakeholder involvement. And when we start the next IRP process, we'll have specific stakeholder involvement like we have had in the past.
And Jay, I think it's important to note that we pushed for larger targets in the IRP than what you originally presented to us. We pushed you to increase, I believe it was by 5, maybe 7%, but we're going to continue to push you guys. I just need to know how we get there. And I know we had nuclear, I know we had solar farms, but the next IRP process should be more granular into other options and other paths forward. And that's been my expectation all along, that this was the first time this body has undertaken such an initiative with the IRP. We learned a lot from it. And I think we can help direct you go forward to allow us to come back with specific targets that in a future board, maybe it's this body. I don't know what the board's going to look like 2 years from now, but a future board can address this resolution and update it, which is what my thoughts would be, is that this addresses what I intended to have it address in April. And I think we get more specific as we evolve all of our conversations and all of our knowledge.
The only thing I caution everybody with is this technology is changing, whether it's battery, solar, nuclear, hydrogen, very quickly. And we're in the first generation. And, we just got to think through what happened at Vogel and how do we make our bets? How do we think through this? And how do we make this transition? With that, is there a motion to move this forward?
Just one more. As we prepare to cast our votes, is it safe to say that this resolution, this document is dynamic, meaning that it can change and evolve, and as we are going along in this process, we would have the ability to pivot if needed, if some form of technology came forth that
Yes.
we just needed to jump on.
But I make two comments. One is these guys are looking at it every day. And I mean, I would say Jay and his team are, they're focused on meeting these goals, exceeding these goals, but also we've got to make sure that we're making smart decisions with what's happening from a technology standpoint and how long a lead time that we have to make these decisions. But yes, absolutely. Is there a motion to move this forward?
Move approval.
Second?
Aye.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Ray?
Good morning.
Another easy subject we're talking about.
I would like to say that I'm going to, as the last presenter, end on an up note, but unfortunately that's not going to be the case. And by the way, I'll be at the West Jacksonville Rotary Club tomorrow to present on the IRP. So it's a continuing, evolving conversation and discussion. So let me just go ahead and get started. I was remiss. Good morning, Chair Stein. Good morning, board members. I'm here today. We are here today because I have a suite of people that are also anxious to answer any questions that you may have to provide an update on supply chain challenges. I'm going to also touch on the impacts that we are experiencing, that our customers are experiencing, touch on activities that we have been employing to help mitigate some of those impacts. As you can see from this slide right here, and as most of you are aware, we have been dealing with this issue for over 2 years, and it's not an issue that is unique to JEA. It's a nationwide issue. And the challenges have spanned the gambit from transformers to switchgear to valves, but the one that has vexed us most, that has vexed our customers most, has been transformers. In the past, it was the smaller single-phase transformers that affected the residential developments. And however, today, it is those larger three-phase transformers that are utilized by our commercial customers and the multi-tenant customers. And in large fact, the gap of supply and demand has been driven by, of course, and it's going to seem evident, but lack of supply and larger than thought of demand. And there's also been an increase in our maintenance or our replacement of those three-phase transformers. So impact. So unfortunately, as you see on this next slide, we are at the point where there is going to be an impact. So there are 10 projects that are currently ready for service. And when I say 10 projects, those are development projects that are ready for service that are now going to be impacted. And the projection for that is that they could see up to 8 months of delay. And this is I think a previous speaker had mentioned the balancing act. This is a balancing act of several variables. So it's a balance of when suppliers say demands or when the supplies are going to be in, when our customers say that they are ready, and any one of these variables change, that has an impact on what you see. There's also a projection as we look forward, about 114 projects that are forecasted to be ready for service next calendar year that could see impacts up to 6 months delay. The only positive note on this is, and I know Jay had presented on this at the last board meeting, that number back then was 151 projects, was 8 months delay. I know just a little bit of solace can be taken for that, because these are still relatively large numbers that we are talking about. And the reason that has dwindled isn't because of additional supply. It's because the projection for when those projects are going to be ready for service. So we're going to keep updating the board, because this is an issue. We're not asking for any action, but making sure that there is awareness of what we are dealing with. And last on that slide there, we are in the middle of hurricane season. So it's very, very important that we maintain a stock for those customers that could be impacted if we were to get impacted by a hurricane. So we are still okay when it comes to what we call our storm stock. So mitigating impact, as you can see from this slide, and some of the board members have heard about this before, not our new board member, but some of the things that we have put into place is partial energization, so being innovative. So if there is a let's say apartment complex, like which units are going to be priority. Assessing in-service underutilized transformers and harvesting and redeploying that. What's not listed on here is refurbishing transformers. So for maintenance reasons, if we were to take a transformer out, we are now refurbishing those transformers so that they can now be part of the inventory and ready to redeploy. Adding additional suppliers, we've almost quadrupled our suppliers, have gone from 2 to 7 additional suppliers, and assessing putting additional suppliers on. We are realigning our slots with our suppliers to meet demand. And most recently, we have developed a model so we can better align supply with forecasted demand. And that's what's shown here. And the input from the model, I think this illustrates all of the variables that we have to keep in mind to balance. We're hopeful that this tool will allow our staff to better project the inventory levels and point to future supply gaps before they escalate and before we're here presenting to the board, so we can mitigate. And the other thing that this provides is some adaptability for future changes, and allows our planning folks to compensate for those variations. As I conclude here, and of course open to questions, what we really wanted to do with this is to keep this before the board for awareness, but I guess take some comfort. We keep pressing forward. We're keeping our communications with our customers open. It's important that communication stay in place. As recently we had, I call it the development forum at UNF on August 22nd, and Board Member Morales was there and spoke. So our customers are aware that this is happening. We continue to work with our suppliers. We continue to look for open slots. We continue to re-engineer wherever possible. So not taking the foot off the gas, but this is impactful, and that's the reason that we're bringing this before the board, and we'll continue to do so as far as updates. But based on the current projections and based on the current information, that we believe that in the next 6 to 9 months that we will be in a better position by the end of the next fiscal year, the end of the quarter of the next fiscal year, and hopefully would have addressed the backlog.
Right, thank you. Any comments? Questions? Rick?
Obviously, this is something that I've been very close to for the last almost 2 years. I got to commend Jay and his staff for, their communications with the development community. They've done a great job. And unfortunately, this is real dollars and real money that we're affecting people. And we just have to keep doubling down and keep trying to find, I think it's great. We're refurbishing and we're repurposing and we have 7 new suppliers and so forth. But we still have to keep looking for other alternatives because we have 7 more suppliers. Are there another 7 out there or whatever? Because obviously you can imagine a large commercial project, 8-month delay is real money. And we need to keep working on this, but commend Jay and his staff for everything they've done, but let's keep driving it. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I have a question around the projects and kudos on on reducing the number of projects that are in queue. But as I was looking this over, I'm wondering around safe and affordable housing, are there projects in there that are dedicated to trying to solve for the housing crisis that communities in Jacksonville is experiencing? And is there sort of a stack rank or precedence given to those projects that would address that issue for our citizens?
Do you want to take that one?
So there are different projects. I can't say that some of these that are in the queue right now, I don't know if some of those address that affordability issue. But as far as like what takes priority, that's a discussion with the developer. Usually it's first in, how it's been in the past, it's first in, first out. But now the world has changed, and even though you're first in, that conversation is, when do you really think you're going to be ready to energize? And are you going to be wholly energized, or is there a way that we can partially do that? So those are the type of the conversations that we are having. So it's no longer you're first in, and we're going to take all those transformers for your entire project and put those to the sides. Now it's like a multitude of different variables to address that issue.
It's also, we do not have a priority for affordable housing, but developers also cannot pay extra to get ahead in the queue. So it's a fair playing field on the timing so that we can serve all of our customers the best way we can.
With that, is there any old business, new business? Only thing I'd say is Kwanzaa, welcome. We're excited that you're part of our group. And Marty, we missed you. Have a great day, and this meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everybody.